Okay, thank you for the introduction and for organizing this conference today, and thank you all for being here. You are aware that the theme of the conference will be about intercultural management in the age of globalization. So I'll try to entertain you for 30 minutes, and I hope it will be interesting for you, and then we have time for questions as well afterwards, okay? But first, let me take you back to Davos. You just mentioned something about that when we were signing. Last week at the World Economic Forum, there was, the people were talking about the fourth industrial revolution. And one of the themes that I read about was the future of work. How will the workplace look like in 2030, which is actually not that long from now. And it was about robots taking over our jobs. And I guess this is nothing new. Robots have been taking over jobs before. But in Davos, they talked a lot about this theme. And interesting enough, in the article that I read about this, there was a reflection being made about the educational systems of today that are not yet fully in sync with this coming trend. Because in many schools still, we put students behind their desks or behind the desks in the classroom for many hours per day. We present them with lots of facts and figures, and we expect them to memorize that. But actually, robots are much better in memorizing these things. On the other hand, what human beings are good at is the social intelligence that we need to work together in companies to achieve our organizational objectives. Things like convincing, influencing, coaching, that is what we can do as human beings. And I saw, when I was reading that article, I actually saw a connection to the theme of the conference today here. Because when you want to be successful in the job, and when you want to be someone who can cooperate together with others, negotiate, coach, convince, influence, as I just mentioned, then intercultural management will be an important skill for you to have as well. So that was Davos. And then I would just like to introduce myself a little bit. So I have been working for Volvo since '96, and I have had the opportunity actually to work in different positions in HR in the Volvo Group, starting from a local position to a more regional position. It was Europe back then, and now a global position. I am Belgian, and I live in Belgium, but I commute to Sweden very often, where I have most of my team members. But I have one team member actually here in Lyon, and now Eric, I can see you over there, you can wave. Eric is our Director, Diversity and Inclusion. He is American, but you have lived and studied in Lyon as well for many years, right?
She started right across the street.
Okay. And Eric just came back from a business trip to Shanghai and Beijing. What was it, 2 weeks ago, or maybe last week, where he has run the Train the Trainer in diversity and inclusion training with about a group of about, 12 people or something like that, participants, to become trainers in diversity and inclusiveness, because we think that is a very important theme, and we put a lot of effort in organizing this type of trainings for our managers. And you told me, Eric, that the group of participants was consisting of like 10 different nationalities this time. So just to give you that idea on how diverse that group was in terms of nationalities. Eric is working on this project. And then I have Anna Karin in Sweden. She is Swedish, based in Sweden, and she's currently working on a project to roll out a system that we will use to support our managers in doing a talent review. She will roll out that project this year for all 9,000 managers worldwide. And she's based in Sweden. Then I have Vasuki, who is another team member, based in Gothenburg as well. He's on an expat assignment. And one of the projects that he's working with is competencies in the US. So I just give you these examples to share with you the context that I work in and the context that my team members work in. We are only a group of 7 people, but we deal with talent and competence management issues and topics for the whole Volvo Group. And some of us are based in Gothenburg. I'm based in Belgium. Erik is based in Lyon. And it's actually from that experience that I will talk to you today. I am not a professor, but I can talk from experience. And I hope that you will pick up something today that you can take away and that you can use in your own personal life as well. So the presentation for today is built up in 3 blocks. I will first talk a little about the Volvo Group, because I think it is important that you understand this context that I started to explain a little bit. Then I will talk about intercultural management, the topic of today, the what and the why, and then we will switch over to some practices in the Volvo Group as examples. Before I start talking about the Volvo Group, I just want to check with you by raising some questions. How intercultural is this group actually? So how many of you have been born and raised in France? Okay. Obviously a majority, but still I don't think it's an overwhelming majority. Huh? So that's a first indication. How many of you have lived and, have maybe studied abroad already? Okay. Any one of you who has parents that are living in a different country than the one that they were born in? So you see, there are hands being raised the whole time. I could ask you if you have been traveling extensively abroad or anything else. So this is a group that has been exposed to different cultures already. So I think that you will certainly recognize some of the things that I will say today. Good, the Volvo Group then. When I walk around like this, can you hear me? No? Or can I take this mic, maybe? No, I'll try to stand here. I'll behave. So, Volvo Group. Volvo Group is a group that has started actually in 1927. It's okay. I have this one in my hand. So. 1927, and we have become one of the world's biggest manufacturers of trucks. I think you are all aware of that. But also construction equipment, marine and industrial engines, and buses. And we provide complete solutions, financial and services solutions to our customers. We are a company that is a bit special in that sense that we are not a one single branded company. It's not only Volvo that we produce, it's not only Volvo that we sell. If you look at the trucks brands, for instance, of course, Volvo is there, but as you are very well aware here in France, in 2001, Renault Trucks joined the group, and Mack Trucks as well. Then we had, in 2007, a joint venture starting up in India with Eicher Motors. And we had UD Trucks, Japanese company, joining the group as well. And last year we joined, we signed a strategic alliance actually with Dongfeng, which is a Chinese truck manufacturer. So you can see that by doing all this, our group has become more and more global. On the construction equipment side, a similar story. There we have Volvo, we have SDLG, which is a Chinese brand as well. And then we have recently brought in T-Rex to the group, and they have their headquarters in Scotland. Volvo buses, similar story. UD buses, Japanese. We have Sunwind buses, Chinese. And then we have Prevost and Nova bus, which are 2 North American brands. And that is a bit special, because it shows you also how our employee base has developed over the years. We now are a company of about 100,000 people, and we have production facilities in 19 countries, and we are selling our products in more than 190 countries. So just to give you an idea of the context of our organization. This is where our employees are located over the world. You can see that we still have the majority in Europe. We have started as a Swedish company. There's a certain logic in that. But we do have 20% of our employees in Asia, 17% North America, and you can read it for yourself. So what does that mean? For a manager in the Volvo Group, it means that there are certainly chances for you to be a manager of a team that is not all located on the same site. As you can see on this picture here, we have about 9,300 managers, and 15% we could say are global managers. Global managers in that sense that they have employees working at least 2 locations, okay? But some of them actually have people working on 4 or more countries. It can go up to 11, I checked actually. I think that manager has a big challenge, by the way. This is from the perspective of the manager having team members, you know, all over the globe. But there are other ways of looking at our company as well, and of looking at the intercultural interactions we need to have. For instance, we have customer solution centers in Belgium, in Ghent, where we have somewhere between 150 and 200 co-workers. They are the ones that are helping the truck drivers when they have a breakdown on the road to get on the road again. So, you know, this kind of call center where the truck driver can call when he has a breakdown. And we are servicing the whole of Europe from that call center in Ghent, meaning that we hire as much as possible native speakers. Because if a Russian truck driver has a breakdown in Poland, he will call to Ghent, and Ghent will help him in Russian, and then they will call also the Polish workshop to help the guy getting on the road again. So that's a completely different setup. There the manager has all the employees physically with him, but they are all talking different languages. And then last but not least, when you look at it from the employee perspective, and that's what that little picture there refers to, I think many of us can say that we are connected with other people all over the world, as I illustrated in the beginning for my own team. And many of us are wearing headsets many hours per day, because of course it's impossible to meet with all of them physically. So this is the context we are working in. And that means that we need to actually be skilled in intercultural management, and that's the theme for today's session. Intercultural management in the age of globalization, that was the title of the session. So let's start with the word globalization, and of course you are familiar with this. What is globalization? It's the process of denationalizing the political, the legal, the economical systems we live in. It's the process where companies look for new markets to enter, where boundaries become more vague, where products get adjusted to the requirements of the other markets, and where the workforce becomes more multicultural, as I illustrated by showing you how Volvo has become the Volvo Group that it is today. And I think the key in this environment is really intercultural management. Cultural management, we said. So cultural groups can be classified in many different ways. We can talk about ethnical cultures, we can talk about national cultures, regional cultures, religion, corporate, professional, maybe. There are many different ways of classifying cultures. What I will focus on here today is national cultures and maybe regional cultures as well, to a certain extent. So what's the challenge really? Language, an obvious one. When you work with people from different countries, you often speak a different language, right? But still, I mean, we can all be educated in English and try to talk the same language. It's more than only the words that we process between each other, right? Even if we understand the same words, there's so much other things playing in the background. And that's what you see on this picture. There is the attitudes and the values that I bring with me, just by the fact that I'm raised in Belgium. There is the behavior that I think is appropriate and that you will think is maybe less appropriate, because you are raised in a different country. There is the work practices resulting from that as well. Things like, am I allowed to speak up in a meeting without being asked? Am I allowed to challenge my boss? How is the power distribution in a team? Is it the boss that has the formal power? Does the boss need to have the formal power? And how is the decision-making process in the work environment? All these factors actually play a role in intercultural cooperation. Those things are playing in the background. And time and space is another one. And I will share a personal example with you there. A couple of years back, I was working in Volvo construction equipment, and I had a global role, and I was interacting with US, Europe, and Asia plenty of the time, actually. And I was based in Brussels. And I remember that I had a discussion one day with a Korean colleague about the fact that we all get so many emails during the day. I guess you know the feeling and the pressure that that can give sometimes. And she, in the dialogue with her, I started to understand something that I really didn't even think about before. And that was simply the fact that we are in different time zones, and when you, in Brussels, send me an email just around lunchtime in Brussels, and you are asking for a response in that email by the end of the day, you have forgotten that I have already left the office, and it's evening time for me. Such a simple story, right? Time zones, of course, and we always take it into account when we plan meetings, for instance, and we have people from Asia, then we try to plan it at an hour that is still convenient for them. But things like sending emails just like that and asking for a reply in a couple of hours, we should think about that as well. Because if we don't, then all of a sudden you realize when you send that email that it's not possible to get a reply. So what do you do then? You put urgent in the subject, in capital letters. Have you ever received an email like that? Then she told me that when you put urgent in an email to someone in Korea, that is like there is a fire and you need to kill the fire. So when they get that type of email, they really drop everything and they will handle your email first of all. They will come out of vacation if they see that email is urgent. And it was so interesting to hear her saying that to me because I had never realized. And by the way, she also mentioned that she had noticed over time that people in Europe interpret the word urgent a little different. But she was, of course, her cultural background, not saying that so directly. So just to give you another example of this time and space perception that might be different in cultures. So what it all comes down to is really that we do not see the things as they are, but we see the things as we are, right? And why is that? Because we have a different frame of reference. You are, I guess, familiar with this metaphor of the iceberg, but I will still explain it. We only see the top of the iceberg, and there's so much more underneath the water surface. But what we see is how we dress, our appearance, our eating habits, our practices. But that's only a very small part of who we are. And underneath the iceberg, there is so much more. There is our values, there is our fears, our beliefs, our social connections. And it's actually all of that together that makes our frame of reference. That makes my frame of reference and yours, and it will be different. And that makes also how we see the world, how we interpret the things we see around us, and why we do what we do. This frame of reference determines what we think is normal, what we like, what we dislike, what we are neutral towards, or what we maybe think is a little strange. So this is a very important concept for us to be aware of. And it really starts here by creating a certain awareness. And this is what I think intercultural management is about. It is really about building up an awareness that our own cultural background determines how we see things. It's the glasses we put on that will make us see the things we see. It is about how we become skilled also in interacting with different cultures in our own organization and in the business environment we work in. And here, you know, this definition, I made it in a business context, but you can apply that to your own personal lives as well, of course. And it is about structures, processes we have and develop in order to achieve organizational goals in a multicultural context. And I will certainly show you some examples more at the end of this presentation on how we do this in Volvo. So this is what, for me, intercultural management is about. And then in the Volvo Group, we put our focus on managers. Why do we do that? Because the managers are the ones setting examples. The managers are the ones rewarding behavior. They are the ones recognizing something in the behavior of their employees that they reinforce. So they are the ones actually transmitting the culture. So for us, that is an extremely important target group when we talk about intercultural management. And it is important for us that our managers are aware of their frame of reference and how they actually see things. Let me show you another example, or let me bring you another example, and I would like to hear your reactions. Imagine a meeting, as we have so many of those, where we have a manager in the US that called for a meeting. It is a virtual meeting because he has 2 of his team members in the US participating in that meeting. He has 2 people from Japan participating as well. And then, why not? He has a French team member as well. This is the meeting, and it is about a topic that everyone is very familiar with. So just try to imagine, it's a virtual meeting. What will happen during that meeting, do you think? Who of the team members will, according to you, take most of the speaking time? Any ideas? We can, the French, aha. We can make a vote maybe. Who thinks it's the French person that will use most of the speaking time? Okay, moderate number of people saying that. Who think it's the people from Japan? Okay, I think there is something in your frame of reference that helps you saying that. Who thinks that it will be the people from the US? Okay, that is, of course, if the manager lets the flow be very natural and doesn't interfere, right? If, though, the manager has a view on cultural differences, then I hope that this manager will invite the people from Japan to speak up as well, because that's probably what they will be waiting for, and maybe hold back the people from the US a little bit to also give room to the others in the meeting and talk. And why is that? Why will we have that type of scenario? Because the Japanese, the French, and the US people will use their frame of reference. And there is this excellent book, which I can really recommend you if you are interested in this topic. It's called The Loudest Duck. And the author of the book is talking about the fact that we all bring our grandma to work. And what she means with that is that, you know, grandma is the one that teaches you things. Grandma is the one that feeds you with this type of sayings. And you will always remember what grandma has said. And it steers your values and it steers your behaviors in a certain way. So just take a look at these sayings. And I see some Chinese people in the room as well. The loudest duck gets shot is a saying that is very common in China. The nail that sticks out gets hammered. That is what they say in Japan. And it's very similar, of course. But the third one, the squeaky wheel gets all the grease, is a bit different, right? But this is what little boys and girls in the US are being raised with. They are told that, you know, you need to speak up. You need to give your view in the classroom when the teacher is asking for a question. Only then you will get noticed. okay? So they feel they are not contributing in a meeting if they haven't said anything. This is frame of reference again. So I can really recommend the book, Laudesdag. So, how do we put all this in practice then in the Volvo Group? Some examples. This is a picture just indicating a few of the things we do towards managers and employees to support them actually with this challenge of intercultural management. I'll start with the diversity and inclusion policy, which to me is very key actually in the global world we are working in. In this policy, we clearly state that we think it's a responsibility of each manager to create a diverse and inclusive environment where every employee is respected and can contribute to its full potential. And you can only do that, you know, when you are aware of concepts like frame of reference. Global meeting guidelines, so simple, but sometimes in my example that I gave about sending out emails and forgetting about time zones, it is needed really to remind people when do you call for a meeting? Please respect the fact that people in Asia go home as well in the evening, or that people in the US should not wake up at 2 in the night to join an early meeting in Europe. Collaboration tools. We have our headsets and Skype, which is part of our daily life in Volvo. We have other tools like Yammer, where people can connect with each other. But what I would like to explain a bit is GlobeSmart. GlobeSmart is actually a web portal where our employees can find a lot of information about doing business in different countries, but also about their own working style. You can do some assessments. I actually move over to this, which gives you a better idea. You can do a kind of assessment that gives you an idea of what is your preferred working style, and you can compare it to the working style, the average working style in different countries, for instance. And then you would see, if you would do that test, that people from Asia and the US are really having very different working styles in terms of time, space, all that, how direct you can be, direct or indirect. So a very interesting tool, which personally I use when I go abroad on a business trip to a country that I've not been before. I go in the tool and see what I can learn and what I should know. And sometimes it's very little thing, but good to know. I didn't do that, by the way, before coming to France, but I think I know a little more. Okay, so that was GlobeSmart. Then in the middle there you see internal and global mobility. We do stimulate and encourage actually internal mobility in the Volvo Group. And when I talk about internal mobility, it's not only about moving people from one country to another, it's also about moving people from one part of the organization to the other, or from one functional area to another. Because we do believe that by moving people around, we create new networks every time. And we also can have a benefit from what people learn and spread that out with new people again. And we have forums where we discuss actually possibilities for people to move from one position to another. We have organizational development. We have the Volvo Group Attitude Survey, VEGAS in short, which we conduct every year. It's a survey which we conduct with our 100,000 employees each year, asking them a number of questions which give us an indication about their employee engagement, about leadership excellence, and about performance excellence. And that gives us results. It actually gives the result of the team and the manager that have completed the survey, which is an excellent base for discussion among the employees in the team with the manager on where can we improve, where can we improve. We have leadership competences, which we put in a framework, and I will not explain the whole framework, but what this picture shows you is that we are really clear towards our leaders on what is it we expect from them in terms of competences as well. And by being clear, I think we provide them in one or another way with a framework that they can use to check their own frame of reference against a bit. Then, of course, we also try to develop these competences, and the Volvo Group University is certainly an important factor in doing that. Now, I don't know if Lisa has arrived. Ah, hi, Lise. Lise is working in the Volvo Group University, and this group function has been established, I think, 3 years back. Two or three, yeah. And as you can see, they have now facilities on several strategic locations for the Volvo Group all over the world. And they are providing trainings and development initiatives to all employees in the Volvo Group in different academies, you could say. And the Leadership and Management Academy is certainly an academy that contributes also to the development of intercultural management skills. You can see there the second one from the bottom, for instance, is a training which is called Leading from a Distance. And that is typically what we are talking about here. So this was just another example. And then we have the last one, intercultural training for expats, as an example. When we send people abroad to a new assignment in a country that they have not lived in before, we do offer them training, intercultural training, them and their family members, by the way, to get to know more about the way of living in the other country, the way they do business, habits, customs, and so on. So this is certainly something that is also supporting them to integrate in a good way and to be successful in their job as well. So now I explained about intercultural management in the Volvo Group, but what do you take away? What does this mean for you? And I would like to say, first of all, that when I started to work in Volvo, Volvo was still a very Swedish company, and I had a very local function in Ghent. And yes, I had some interactions with people in Sweden, but I don't think I had so much more interactions. Then in 2001, Renault joined the group, and then a lot of interactions started with France, and gradually, you know, the interactions expanded also by taking up new roles in HR. So I kind of learned on the way what intercultural management is about and to become more skilled in that. I think I learned it together with the Volvo Group, actually, because we were growing from a Swedish company into a local company. So I had the luxury to have the time to learn it. For you, though, I think this is your challenge from day one. When you enter a company, it is already like that. But I think that your current lives already are much more global than mine was back in '96. So this is the challenge for you. You need to be ready day one, I would say. And there are a number of skills that companies like Volvo and other companies will ask you to bring with you when you join them. The skills are listed over there, and you see that cultural awareness is one of them, collaboration is one of them, and I would say put those two together and we talk about intercultural management. So thank you. That was what I wanted to bring to you today. And then I'm open for all questions.
Hello. Good evening. I'm Ina Mujadou. I'm from the International MBA. So now we can start the question sessions. So don't hesitate to raise your hand to ask question, but I will ask the first one. I have the micro. So thank you so much for this testimony. It was really interesting. And what are the skills, including those taught by your grandma, that have helped you the most to understand other cultures and other countries?
That have helped me the most?
Yes, helped you.
Can you hear me? Including those from my grandma, you said? I think she taught me a lot. What I would say, one skill or attitude, maybe it is more, that is extremely important according to me, is being open to new things, to explore new things, and to don't take things for granted, to not assume that what you think is right is always right. So having this kind of open mindset and wanting to raise questions, to check your assumptions on others, and to test maybe a couple of things, is according to me something that really helps to become intercultural savvy.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Or they are too shy? Ah, okay. Virginia, yes.
Hello. Hello. Oui. Okay. So thank you, Anne, for coming and sharing the Volvo experience with us, because I happen to teach intercultural management. One of the questions the students always bring into classes: how do they do? How do companies do? And so thank you for showing us how you actually do this, and you do this well in the company. I have a couple of questions, but I'll just ask one that I think it's very interesting. So you said you provide training to the expatriates. One of the things that we can see, at least in the testimony of people that go abroad and then come back, is the reverse cultural shock. And do you have something to manage this coming back home? Is there something you do?
Yeah, I think you saw it also on the screen about GlobeSmart. There is a specific section on that one.
Okay.
The reason why we invest in this type of training for expats is because we know that it can put a lot of pressure on the expat and the family when he or she moves abroad. But also coming back can be a real difficult situation. Especially, for instance, when you have brought your children with you to a foreign country and they have grown up there. Just imagine bringing your children to Japan for 5 years and then move back to Europe. What a difference. So sure, we are aware of this, and we try to support the expats in that sense. But I also think we can do more. We give our we don't give our expats, but we advise them to take a mentor when they go abroad, which can certainly help also to share this type of experience. If you take a mentor who has been maybe living in that country as well, it can be a factor that supports. So there are several ways, I think, to work with this, but that we need to have attention to the topic, I certainly agree with you.
Thank you very much. I have other questions.
Yes, I think there was another question on the left.
Good evening. My question is regarding the view that you have as a senior executive about whether intercultural management is something that we have to do in order to make a global organization work, so it is a necessity, or whether it is something that must be pursued as an end in itself because it has intrinsic values.
I would say both. We have to do it because if we don't do, we will run into conflicts, I'm sure. People will run into conflicts and we will not obtain the goals we have as a company or as a team if you start on a smaller scale. But also I think it's more than have to do. I think there is a value in working with intercultural management and in trying to understand each other's ideas. It's more than only understanding, it's even leveraging upon the cultural differences to become better. And maybe more creative as a company by combining really the strengths of all the different cultures.
I wanted to ask you for advice. I'm here also an international MBA student, and we have a lot of work in teams. And of course, if you are in international teams, there are some conflicts sometimes. It's inevitable. So is there a good way to resolve conflicts? Because, for example, I'm from Russia, and for me it has always been best to discuss openly the issues we have and to probably find a common solution. But I have noticed that for some people it's awful. They cannot discuss it openly and they try to hide from it, and sometimes you really don't know what to do.
I can certainly recognize what you are saying. I think we have all been there. Is there one solution? I don't know. But what I would recommend is to try to understand the conflict, what the source of the conflict is. And it is probably because you have different values and different behaviors, different work practices. And just talking about that, I think, can already be a good starting point to resolve the conflict. How am I looking upon this, and how are you looking upon what is important for me, what is important for you? That type of dialogue I would recommend you to have.
Thank you.
I have another question on a particular topic, so the ethics. We know that the concept of ethic could be different from a country to another's, and in a global company as Volvo, you may have managers based in other countries that maybe have to take very difficult decisions and maybe not aligned with the ethic of the domestic country. What would be your advice or the processes you could put in place to help them?
First of all, I would say that Volvo is very strict in following all laws and legislations and being an ethical company. And we have something which is called the Code of Conduct, which is a base document for everyone working in Volvo. Employees and managers are trained in that document, and that gives us a very clear direction of what is okay and what is not okay. So in case a manager has to take a tough decision and is not sure about the ethics of it, then I think Code of Conduct would definitely be a document to go to and consult. We also have the Volvo Way, which describes the way we want to work and the values as a company that we want to live. And there is certainly also internal support in this type of cases. We have also taken decisions as a company to not do business in certain countries, for instance, because it's conflicting with our ethical rules.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Okay, so I have another one. So I have a lot, but it's okay. I will never stop. We were talking about the difference coming from culture, because we have people coming from different countries, but do you have to manage today the difference within a country, but between people from different generations? And how do you cover this different culture?
So let me check if I understood the question correctly. We talked about intercultural differences, where we defined cultures as national cultures.
Yes.
What you want to know is generational
Exactly.
differences. Mm-hmm. I think my story could be a bit the same. It is. I would again display the iceberg, I guess, and refer to the frame of reference. It is about how we are raised. It is about our grandma. Again, and the grandma of one generation is probably a different grandma from the current generation. So it is, if you go out today, and you should remember one thing, I think it is really this iceberg metaphor, because it's so powerful. It is powerful in conflict, it is powerful when you go abroad, and it is powerful when you work with different generations on the same work floor. Trying to understand that we don't see the things in the same way is a starting point of avoiding conflicts or starting up a good cooperation.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, if I were a duck, I would get shot, certainly. But I'm not a duck. Well, actually, you talked about an assessment that is available on Global Smart. Is this something you guys have developed it internally, or is that something you got from a consultant, for example, like Hofstede or Muis Ruiz?
It is not developed by Volvo. It is actually part of the GlobeSmart web portal that we have a license to. Okay. It's a very simple assessment tool with, I think, only 4 skills. I actually have a slide in the material, but I can show you maybe afterwards. Okay. And it is something similar like the cultural dimensions of Hofstede, but it's not those, it's something else. It's about risk and certainty, it's about direct and indirect, interdependency and dependency, and then the 4th one escapes me at the moment. But what it does is, so you do the assessment, it's a very basic number of questions, and then you get your profile. You can compare that profile with an average other profile. You can even invite employees of your own team to do the same assessment, and then you can have a discussion around that. So if Erik and I are in the same team, we have, I think we even did it, Erik, isn't it? So in the tool we can share actually our profiles with each other, and then you can see like, oh, okay, that's why he's acting the way he's acting, because he has a preferred work style which is very direct, for instance. Mm-hmm. And I am at the other side of the scale. So that is an interesting point for us to be aware of when we work together. Okay. So not developed by ourselves, but available within GlobeSmart.
Okay. And any manager can go and check, and for example, if I eventually, the situation that Elena described, she's having trouble with her team, she doesn't need to ask for permissions, to just go to the platform and...
Yep. And she could, in that case, if we take that really as a case, she has discussions in a certain project team, and she knows, for instance, the nationality of the others. She could compare with the preferred or average working style of that culture, or invite the people as well to do it. And then there's a lot of tips and tricks, like what do you do if you are this type of person, and you work together with someone who is more on that side of the scale. So it's not only doing the assessment, it's also how to work then with the outcome of the tool. So very hands-on, practical thing.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you. I'm an American student in the International MBA program, and I'll be working in Europe afterwards. And I observe the interactions between all of my classmates and I'm seeing that there are times when I'm not aware of how maybe Americans could be better at receiving the environments that they're in a business situation. We can naturally be really outgoing and really kind of aggressive, but are there some things that you would give advice for those of us who are going to be working outside of our culture and need to be better aware of how to read the situation that you've seen in your experience?
I give a very general answer, but for me the answer is, first, the fact that you raised the question is really good, because it shows that you are aware that maybe your behavior as an American then is being perceived differently by other people. And then I would say try to understand this difference in a way when you will work with other countries, and read about what is the preferred working style in those other countries, and how different is that from mine, and how can I adjust to a certain extent. I don't think we should all, become exactly the same. It's nice to have some flavor as well, but just to understand that it might not be so much appreciated if you take all the talking time in a meeting, for instance, because you think it is important. This is the squeaky wheel expression there. Just be aware of that and observe what happens during the meeting if you take all that time. And try, maybe in next meeting, to take less time and see what happens then. Experiment with it. Eric wants to add something.
An example that fits the situation, but as an American who's had to adjust to Europeans. We have an awareness scale that talks about how you can start out at a zero level where there are no differences. And I think a lot of times Americans, we're in that scale because we have a big country and we're not used to meeting people who are different. When my grandmother came, my grandmother came to France, she couldn't understand that French was a different language. She actually thought that when people spoke French, it's when they spoke English with a French accent. So that's what I call the zero level. And then the first level of awareness is where there are problems, there are differences, but there's no problems. It doesn't matter, so I don't have to pay attention to it. And I think there's a certain maturity to get to that level to realize that, yes, okay, they are there and they matter. And the third level then is, okay, I understand their differences, they matter, but gee, I don't know what to do about them, so I'm just going to pretend they don't exist. And what we want to get to is the final level of awareness where they exist, they matter, I have to manage them, and now I have some tools to do it. So I think we work through that. You know, we go from totally an environment where we've never been exposed to differences to really being ace at handling them.
Okay, I guess I'm going to be the third American in a row. So, hello, fellow Americans. So my question is a bit on a different topic. Since many of us will be future managers going into a very globalized environment, my question is more about how do you think we should handle the shifting global population? As populations in the European and American countries start to go down, and with the talent center, with the baby boomers leaving, as that starts to decrease while populations in Africa and Asia increase, do you think it would be better to try to manage talent being brought in from other countries into what were traditionally places that sent talent out? Or do you think it would be better to start trying to retain your current employees and rotate them around the world a bit more? Sorry.
We as a company, you mean what our strategy would be?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I would like to acknowledge what you were saying. In the same article I was referring to at the beginning of the conference about Davos, was something about by 2030, I think it was, 2/3 of the graduates will come from emerging markets. So that's your colleagues. I think our strategy is, as you have seen, I mean, we have grown and we are present in several parts of the world. When we bring in new companies, those companies sometimes are at a different level of maturity in doing business as we are. They know their local market, but they don't have, for instance, the maturity to export their products to Europe, as an example. That's where we can help each other. And that's why typically we establish joint ventures. And in that case, there is certainly a certain logic to bring people from the well-established markets to the emerging country to help them building up that competence, or the other way around, bring people from that country to headquarters, for instance, or to a mature market to learn from that market and then bring back the knowledge to the country. So there are, I think, several ways which we will always have to use. I don't think there is like one single direction. It depends a lot on the specific situation and on the maturity of the country we are talking about. But I certainly see that, I hope to see, let me put it like that, in a couple of years from now, when I look at our talent review situation, which every year again we do in Volvo, we review the leadership strength, and we analyze that a bit as well. We see how diverse is this pool in terms of gender. You were the third man in a row, you said, yeah? But also how diverse is this pool in terms of nationalities. Do we have a top management group that is very Swedish, or are we actually representing in our top management group as well the global environment we are working in? And there I see some room for improvement, and I hope in a couple of years from now to see that we are more diverse in terms of nationalities as well. And if we want to do that, then we need to bring in more talents from other countries to this type of positions. Yep. Is that your hand, Erik, or the one sitting next to you? Okay.
I'm curious who you benchmark against.
For what specifically?
For diversity and intercultural management.
I think the answer can come from the person sitting next to you.
So a lot of our benchmarks are based upon different groups we belong to. But we have, for instance, benchmarked with HP, with IBM. They are generally seen as a leader in the area of diversity and inclusion, working on that for a very long time. We've also benchmarked with Google, for instance. Actually, we're very proud that Google benchmarked us in terms of the way we measure diversity and inclusion. So it's we take any opportunity we can to measure to the others, but those are some of the big names, which are typically global companies. We've also benchmarked with Nestle down the road in Switzerland.
So I am a master's student in hospitality management, and a few weeks ago there is a big merge between two hotel brands, and as I see, Volvo has integrated as well some totally different company like Renault Trucks or some Japanese brand. And for me as well, intercultural management is about as well corporate values, and how did Volvo integrate these employees, and how long did it take to completely merge two completely different company?
My first, and then Nathalie, I hope you can contribute a little bit about the situation specifically in France as an example. But I would first like to say that I think that the baseline is the Volvo Way, which I briefly mentioned in the presentation. The Volvo Way describing really what we think are the key factors to success in our organization. And that is a lot about how do we work together, what do we think is important. We have described that in a way that it provides all of us a same base. Then it is important to have a dialogue about that as well, because respect for me can be something different as respect for you, or respectful behavior for me can be different from respectful behavior for you. So a lot of workshops around that and dialogues around that in the teams and with the managers are important to start to explore these differences in frame of reference, and to start to set a kind of common line going forward. Then if we can take the case for Renault, for instance, back in 2001, were you here already, Nathalie? Can you contribute? You were not. He was there, but I was not. Someone who would like to say, at least, maybe you can, no? And Erik?
No, sorry, I was not there in 2001. I joined Volvo in 2008, so I think my colleagues in the room could support us in that. I think the Volvo Way is definitely our common ground, and very important for that. I think also it's a long journey, and I think that intercultural management helps a lot. Being in global teams and working on a daily basis with other countries, with different cultures, it definitely helps a lot. So this is what I can see from now, but I don't know about the journey from 2001. Maybe Lise, you would like to add something?
Yeah, I think it was it's a good question, and it was really a progressive journey. I joined the Volvo Group in '99, so I was also part of the building of the one company spirit, Volvo company spirit, with several brands. I think we gain maturity over time, and what is happening now is that we are quite clear that we have identity with values for Volvo employees, and we have different values for the brand promise. And so someone can refer to the values of the brand and can refer to the common values for Volvo employees. So we have two sets of values in order to not to jeopardize the brand identity that needs to be very strong. So salespeople, they know the brand values, but we have also the Volvo values that are the overall umbrella that is recognized by all employees.
And I do agree with you, Nathalie. It takes time. It takes a lot of time, and it's like a journey. I remember the first benchmarking visits. I was working in Ghent back then. People from Renault visiting the trucks factory in Ghent, the Volvo trucks factory. And before the visitors, because we considered them really as visitors, not yet as colleagues. Before they came, there was a lot of preparation for this meeting to see what will we show them, what will we not show them, what language will we talk. Will we talk French? Because we can, but is that actually good? We should maybe talk English to be in the same position. All that type of things were being discussed. And that was the very first phase. It was a different company. But now those type of discussions are far gone. But we are 2016 now, so it takes a while.
As a Volvo manager, what I could add to what you say about how to integrate another culture, what helps a lot is Swedish culture, which is really a culture of consensus. So before taking a decision, you need to listen all your colleagues, and it maybe takes some time, but at least really everyone has a possibility to speak and to take time to speak. So I think it's really in line with the Swedish culture.
Thank you for adding that.
Hello, I'm a Chinese student here in Lyon, and I have a question concerning the recruiting process. As you know, an international company will recruiting people from around the world with different cultural backgrounds. And I want to know, you use the same evaluation methods, or you use different frameworks to manage and recruiting people? And the second, last week we have a career forum in our school, and you know, when I want to introduce myself to different employers, they will first ask you, can you speak French? Maybe some people will say, oh no, and then they just get rejected by the employers, because communication as a language is the first step. Even I can speak French. When I pass the first step of language, I can't pass the second barrier, you know. So I want to know what's the standards and what's the evaluation the foreign companies just look at and just evaluate to recruiting people from around the world. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. I cannot talk specifically about the practice in France. I don't know if you want to add maybe something afterwards, Nathalie. But more in general, to answer your question, first of all, the question whether you speak the language, whether you speak French in this case, very much depends on the type of job you will be doing, of course. But I work in Sweden more than 50% of my time, and I don't speak Swedish. And my colleagues don't speak Flemish, and it's not a problem. So I'm certainly not recruited for my language skills. And we have in Volvo this working language, which is English. But again, I mean, for some positions, of course, it can be needed that you speak the local language. If you have a position where you have lots of interactions, for instance, with people on the work floor, in the plant, in the factory, who don't speak English, then of course that will be a handicap. So we need to be a bit realistic there as well. I think that answers your first question. I don't know, Nathalie, if this is if you in your recruitment process add something to that.
I can leave the mic to my colleague Dominique Guillemet, who is responsible for recruitment also, so you can have an answer from Dominique. But I recognize some behaviors in France. I think we're not that good in terms of languages and speaking English. When it comes from Volvo, I mean, English is the first language. I mean, it's our common language, so there is no problems when it comes to the language. But I'm not that surprised about your comment and your question. But maybe, Dominique, you would like to add something?
So if I understood, a part of your question was about recruitment method, if there is a standard in terms of recruitment method. Yeah, we have the same standard. So I belong to a global team. We are 8 managers from the 8 main countries in the world, and we are applying exactly the same method in terms of recruitment. We do most of the recruitment of the interview with what we call competence-based interview. And when Anne was presenting some leadership pipeline competencies, so we use the same competencies in the main countries, and we build the interview with some very specific question in relation with the competencies. So we also sometimes use some tests for some managers, some personality tests, and we use the same kind of tests in the main countries. So we really have a standard way of recruiting in the main countries in the world.
And maybe important to add to that as well, in this case for tests to be used in recruitment, but also in our survey that we do annually among all our employees, is that we always look for suppliers for these type of tools that have a very broad test base, or that in other words have data that represent actually the global world and not only Swedish data or French data or whatever. So we have a very broad reference point as well if we compare with averages or whatever.
Yes, I think it will be the last questions, but okay, you can do.
So, hello everyone. I'm actually a French student, but I'm from Chinese origin, so yeah. My question is about language as well. Do you provide language classes for instance, when you have a new brand, a new company that is from a really local, I mean, for instance, Asian, they tend to speak less English than in Swedish, for example? So do you provide classes or this kind of...
When we have brought in other companies in the Volvo Group, some of those companies really only talked the local language and had no or poor knowledge of English, and it's still the case for some, actually. So we do invest in language trainings in those areas, where we also aim, of course, for certain target groups to come up to a level of English that is good enough for them to be able to contribute in virtual meetings and to understand all the communication that goes out from headquarters, which is in English. And I think in France you have also invested in the past. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for this presentation and for having answered the questions.
Thank you.